This is the BrewDemon. I love this fermenter. I got one a few years ago, tried it once, and immediately had to go out and get a few more. Nowadays, unless I'm doing something specific like a 1 gallon batch or pressure fermenting or something, I default to this. It has basically the perfect form factor for a cheap fermenter. Here, let me show you. We're talking about Demon Brewing's 3 gallon fermenter. Now that I'm older, I don't party as much, I don't drink a keg of beer a night, 2 to 3 gallons is a pretty good size for a batch. Demon Brewing also has a 1 gallon fermenter, but it's honestly complete garbage. Like, I don't even know how they can feel comfortable associating their brand with this crap. So let's talk about the cone shape real quick. To call it a conical fermenter is a bit of a gimmick. I think it's a marketing ploy. They shaped it like this just so that they could market it that way. It doesn't have any of the features that you would look for in an actual legitimate conical fermenter, but it's also not several $100s. In all honesty, it would probably be the same value if it was just a standard flat bottom fermenter. But I'm not suggesting you buy it for the cone shape. I'm suggesting you buy it for everything else that's awesome about it. Now, any container that's food grade and can be sealed with an airlock qualifies as a fermenter. So your cheap plastic buckets and your carboys will work. And if you're new to the hobby or you're just trying to do it as cheaply as possible, I do suggest just going with a plastic bucket. It's cheap and it does the job. But I will say that the bare minimum for a functional fermenter is for it to have a wide mouth. So don't use a carboy for that. They're much better used for aging. Eventually, you're going to want to upgrade from a cheap plastic bucket and get something with some quality. And I don't claim to have tried everything out there, but I've tried a bunch of them. And at $65, the BrewDemon is a touch more expensive than the direct competition, but it's also a lot better than the other ones I've tried. First, let's talk about the wide mouth. You can really get your arm all the way down in there and scrub it clean. With a plastic bucket, when you hammer the lid down, in my experience, you never really get a good seal. But once you upgrade, any of these higher quality fermenters are gonna have a screw top. And the BrewDemon's is particularly nice. The lid itself is solid, and it's got this tall lip and these thick threads so you can really screw it down tight. And I feel like the extra screwing does get a tighter seal and helps protect the batch better. And it's also got this like rubber or foam or whatever material disc inside. So once you screw it down all the way, it creates an airtight seal so you can be sure your batch isn't getting oxidized. Something I like about the BrewDemon that not a lot of other fermenters do is that you get a lid and a bung and they're separate. So if you need to like swap out the airlock or take a gravity reading or something else along the way, you don't have to open it up completely and expose it to air. You can just pop out the bung and you're good. I do wish they didn't use like a proprietary size bung. It'd be nice to get a whole bunch of just standard size bungs and use them for all of my fermenters, but that's capitalism, I guess. Speaking of the bung, I think my only real gripe with the BrewDemon is the bung hole. The rest of the BrewDemon feels solid and thick, but the plastic around the bung hole just feels thin and flimsy. It feels like if you push the bung in at all, it's just gonna pop straight through. Like it doesn't sit quite right in the hole. Compare that to, for example, the little big mouth bubbler, which also happens to be my favorite 1 gallon fermenter. You see how the bung hole has this thick plastic and this tall lip? That gives it more surface area of contact between the bung and the hole, which makes a better seal. That said, I've done dozens of batches at least with this thing, and I've never actually had an issue. So it just feels that way. I gotta also say, it comes with this little venting plug to use instead of an airlock, but I wouldn't trust this thing. Toss it immediately and just use the bung and an airlock instead. The BrewDemon is made from plastic, which you can decide for yourself how you feel about that. There's pros and cons to the different materials fermenters can be made from, but that's a topic for another video. It is made from food grade, heat tolerant, BPA free plastic, and it's thick and solid, so it's gonna last. I've had mine for years, and I've never had an issue with even one of them. What I really like about the BrewDemon, which I don't understand why it's not a more common thing, is that the material is transparent without being translucent, if that makes sense. The color of the plastic is listed as frost, which is just this white color. And this color helps to protect against the sunlight. Most other fermenters are either completely clear, which lets all the light in, or completely opaque, and then you can't see if there's like mold or something growing. There's a reason beer and wine glasses are always brown or green. No one wants a skunk drink. Another thing some companies have figured out, but most haven't it seems, is Headspace. The BrewDemon is listed as a 3-gallon fermenter, but it actually clocks in a touch more than that. And what that means is I can make a 2.5 to even a 3-gallon batch in this thing, and there's still plenty of room for foaming and krausen and all of that without making a mess. Fermentation is messy. It bubbles and foams and goes crazy, and if you don't have plenty of headspace in your vessel like the BrewDemon does, that mess will blow up and out of your airlock and get all over your walls and ceiling. And trust me, that's not fun. I've said it before, but I think any good fermenter should have a spigot or something similar for easy liquid transfers during like racking, bottling, kegging, or whatever. And the BrewDemon has a pretty clever spigot setup that I don't think I've seen anything like it before. Even though all of the surfaces of the BrewDemon are rounded, they added this flat little bit where the spigot attaches. That gives it a better area to screw against and creates a better, more reliable seal. Now, I don't know about you, but when I've messed with spigots on buckets and such, I often have an issue creating a good seal because you're screwing a flat nut onto a rounded surface. Too tight and you warp the bucket. Too loose and it's too loose. Either way, you're getting a leak. But the guys over at Demon Brewing solved that problem. I also really like how the spigot has the on and off settings clearly labeled on the handle. It really helps you not to lose any wort or must or make a mess when you're pouring it in, just because you have the spigot turned the wrong way by accident. Let's talk about these weird detached legs for just a second. My first impression about this design choice was that it was going to be wonky to deal with, but it's really not. You slot the fermenter right into the stand just like this. And it just works. You honestly get used to it after a while. Actually, one thing I've started doing, which you can only really do because of the detached stand, is tilting it back at an angle like this, with the spigot pointing up at the ceiling a little bit. This keeps it up and away from the lease, so the sediment doesn't collect in the spigot and end up transferring over during secondary or bottling or whatever. Just tilt it back in the stand like this as far as you can. Be sure to configure the spigot when you attach it, so that when it's in the off position, the handle is pointing down, so it doesn't bump into the ring of the stand here and accidentally open up, pouring beer or meat or wine or something all over the place. You can turn it back upright when it comes time to transfer the batch. Now, I'm not going to say the BrewDemon is the best fermenter out there. If you want a super top of the line, stainless steel, all the bells and whistles kind of fermenter, those are out there. But it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. At only $65, the BrewDemon is a fraction of that price, and it does everything it needs to do well. If you want to get one yourself, they're for sale directly on Demon Brewing's website, or more conveniently on Amazon. I've had a QR code in the top corner of the screen for your convenience this whole video, but I'll also put a link in the description below.